All right, welcome to this second video in this series, Redemption 101, the addiction series. Okay, so in this video series, we are breaking down addiction and wanting to do some very practical things here. And so in this video, what I want to do, in the last one, we looked at the Gospel of Luke and Jesus talking about the reasons that he was anointed by the Holy Spirit. And in this video, I wanna talk about addiction. Okay. Identifying addiction and so that we can recognize it, so that we can see it in other people's lives, and so that we don't mischaracterize some things. Okay. And so let's take a look at identifying addiction. And so first and foremost, I do want to talk about drug use as a whole. Okay, drug use as a whole. And when we're talking about drug use as a whole, I want to talk about specifically three different types of drug use. We need to be able to differentiate between these three different types of drug use. And then I'm going to give you really, if I can say it this way, an opinion on each of them. Okay. And so here we go. Three types of drug use. All right. Type number one, we are going to call recreational drug use. When we're talking about recreational drug use, what we are talking about is people using chemicals, substances for recreational purposes. Okay, people using substances for the effect that it provides, right? The psychosensual effect that it provides. And so it's going to, it's going to affect your brain. And when it affects your brain, this drug use, it's going to provide some sort of a euphoric effect. We'll get into the different effects of drug use in a later video, but it's going to give you either a high or it's going to give you a low. It's going to give you energy and make you feel grandiose and make you feel larger than life, or it's going to, really just kind of, bring you down and make you feel relaxed, or make you feel at peace, or make you feel, some sort of a euphoric love type feeling, right? And so it's going to do one or the other. And so when we're talking about the first type of drug use, you're using for recreational purposes, right? This would be, anything from smoking a cigarette. This would be anything from, and I'm talking for a recreational purpose, right? We're not even to the addictive drug use yet. This would be anything from smoking marijuana just to feel the high, right? This would be, drinking a beer with your meal, right? Drinking a glass of wine to wind down, after a long day or a long week of work. That's all recreational drug use. This would be taking something like ecstasy at a rave party, right? That is for recreational purposes. And so when we're talking about recreational drug use, you're in control. Okay. And I don't mean of the effect of the drug. I'm talking about the use, right? You are voluntarily taking that drug. You're voluntarily using it, and you're doing it for a recreational purpose. You're doing it for the feeling that you get from it. Okay. So we're going to pause that one right there because I'm going to compare and contrast these different ones. The second type of drug use is what we're going to call medicinal drug use or medical drug use, right? In medicinal drug use or medical drug use, you are using some form of medicine, some form of a drug, right? And you're using it for a medical purpose, right? And typically there is a level of discomfort. You have some level of discomfort in your body. It could be pain, chronic pain. It could be, a headache. It could be, even you take medicine to help with nausea, or you take medicine to help with dizziness, or you take it for whatever medical purpose you're taking it. If you have a broken leg, they're going to give you some pretty significant, pain medication to keep that down, right? You have a surgery, you have all these different medical purposes, right? You're going to get some medical medicine, right, to help you address the discomfort that you're feeling, the pain that you're feeling, right? And so when we're talking about medical drug use, We are definitely very grateful for the medical community, right? We are definitely very, very much uh, uh, in favor of the medical community providing good, solid medical care to people who need it, right? To reduce their level of discomfort so that they can continue to function in everyday life. Now we have two separate ones, right? The one you are doing it voluntarily to feel the euphoric effects of. The other one you are taking medicine for a medical purpose, right? To reduce discomfort. All right. And so if you were to draw a scale, right? On the one hand, you have, to the one end, you have what I call the positive zone. To the other end, you have what I call the negative zone. And right in the middle is neutral. Okay. Or normal, right? Just your normal baseline, the way you feel, right? And so when we're talking about recreational drug use, what you're doing is you're starting at neutral and moving into the positive zone where you feel those euphoric effects of the drug. When we're talking about medical drug use, you're starting in the negative zone where you are having, some discomfort in your body or discomfort, in your person, and you're trying to get back to normal. Okay. When we're talking about the third type, all right. If you continue long enough in the first type of drug use and you continue long enough in the second type of drug use, you will most likely, almost inevitably, end up in the third type of drug use, which is addictive drug use. Okay. If you persist in recreational drug use for the euphoric effects, or you persist in medical drug use for the normalizing effect, right? Just to get you back to normal, to your baseline, right? If you persist in those two long enough, you will most likely, inevitably end up in the third type of drug use, which is addictive drug use. Okay. Addictive drug use is not, I better be careful how I word this. It's not for the euphoric effect. It's not for a medical purpose. It is out of compulsion. Okay. We're bringing in this compulsion factor to it. And so when we're talking about addictive drug use, there's a video from years ago. It's called the hijacked brain. Okay. And I believe it was like, if I'm not mistaken, it was like a 60 minutes, video that they put out and talked about how addictive drug use really hijacks your brain. And what it does is it begins to form pathways in your brain where it almost seems like the addiction makes the decisions for you. Okay. We're talking about, we're a very significant and very powerful switch, right? Where all of a sudden you're not using drugs for a medical purpose, or all of a sudden you're not using drugs for the euphoric effect of the drug. Now you're using the drug out of compulsion, right? It's almost as if the addiction itself, right? The very nature of addiction is to compel you to use the drug over and over. Okay. Now here's the thing. Okay, when we're talking about addictive drug use, we'll talk about how to identify it or how to assess it later, right? But when we're talking about addictive drug use, it's very different from recreational drug use. And I think a lot of times those two are misconstrued, right? Those two are misconstrued. And when we're talking about addictive drug use, we really want to be able to separate addictive drug use from recreational drug use, because we do ourselves a big favor when we understand that not all recreational drug use is addictive, and very little of addictive drug use is for recreational purposes. There was a movie that I watched, and I'm very careful with saying the name of this movie, providing people with the name of this movie, because there was some graphic, pretty intense moments in this movie. But I do think that, having worked in the field, it was a pretty good representation, right? I'll give you guys the context of the movie. There was a young man who was in addiction treatment and was able to come home on a home visit for I believe it was like the Christmas holiday or something, and the family wasn't expecting him back for to come for that holiday, and they were very concerned that he was back. Right, they were surprised, but they were concerned that he was home for that holiday. And so, addiction really kind of breeds a distrust, right, in people. And so the family wasn't very trusting of him. And at one point, the mom ends up taking a small baggie of heroin off of her son and hides it on herself, right, so that he wouldn't be able to find it. And so she's holding it. She's got it on her, right? The story progresses, and later on in the story, there's an incident that happens, and the young man runs away because he's got to deal with some things, right? He's got to deal with some issues, got a score to settle from the past, right? And so he leaves, and the mom's out driving around in the middle of the night trying to find him, and she ends up pulling up to a convenience store. And one of her son's friends is standing outside of the convenience store. And in the movie, if you're watching the movie, if you know what's going on, that the guy is clearly like in withdrawal. Like he needs a hit bad, right? And so he's talking to the people going in and out of the store, and he looks like he is rough, right? And so she, gets out of the car and grabs him and, puts him in the passenger seat, and she sits down and she pulls out this baggie of heroin and basically says, if you help me, I'll help you. Where's my son? Right. And he gives her some information of where he might be. And so she gives him this bag of heroin and she says, there, now you can go get high. And he looks back at her and he says, there's no high anymore. And he opens the door and he runs out of the car and runs around the corner of the building. And, that could be confusing for some people, right? Because what does this guy mean? He just got some heroin and he makes a statement like there's no high anymore, right? What he means by that is that his drug use is not producing, his heroin use is not producing any pleasure. It's not moving him over into the positive zone. Right? He is so far deep into that negative zone that all he's trying to do is just minimize the effects, minimize the symptoms of withdrawal that he's experiencing. All he's doing is really trying to get as close to normal as possible so that he can go seek his next hit. All right. So that he can go seek the drug again, so that he can function good enough in order to seek that drug. And so when we're talking about addictive drug use, there is the compulsive factor to it. Over and over again, right? When I was working in addiction treatment, I was working in what's called a harm reduction treatment program, which, we can get into this later, the different types of addiction treatment programs. But I was working in a harm reduction treatment program, which it was the basis of the harm reduction modality of treatment is basically that we understand that relapse is a part of the process. We don't want to allow someone to relapse continuously, but we understand that relapse is a part of the process. So you've got one umbrella is the abstinence based, where if a client relapses once, they're out of the program. Maybe with some grace, they give them twice, right? But they relapse, they're out of the program. They get booted and, go maybe reapply or go try to enroll somewhere else. But when we're talking about harm reduction, we work with people through the relapse process, right? If you relapse again, that's all a part of the recovery process. So we're going to help you walk through some of that and really see what was it that led up to the relapse so that we can avoid that happening again over and over, right? Over and over, I would, have clients that they were good, they were solid, they were clean for, weeks at a time, months at a time. And then all of a sudden, right, we get a hit. They provided a urine drug screen sample for us, and it was positive for illicit drug use. And so I'd bring them into my office and I'd, pull out the report, and we'd sit there and we'd have a talk and about it and see exactly what happened, what led up to your relapse. And more often than not, the answers were, I'm really not sure. It just kind of happened, right? I remember talking to one guy who, I showed him his drug screen, and he said to me, yeah, I mean, I relapsed, right? Well, what happened leading up to it? I really don't know, right? All I know is that all of a sudden it was kind of a foregone conclusion that I'm going to use again. And I went and I used again. And here's the funny part, okay? He made this statement. He said, it's like the moment I used, my brain just kind of, flipped a switch, and I thought, why did I do that, right? There's a pretty popular author who and speaker, right? He's a medical health. He's a medical doctor who made this statement. He said the problem with addiction is it's not a problem of free will. It's more a problem of free won't, because there's nothing stopping you. You have lost your brake system, right? You've lost the thing within you that is able to say no, right? Now let's bring this back to a biblical perspective, right? Let's bring this back to a Bible-based perspective, because when we're talking about the ability to choose, right, the free will of a person, do we ever lose our free will? That's something that's in Christian circles, when we're talking about addiction, right? That's something that seems to come up quite a bit. Is you have a free will. You can just say no to the drug, right? Really? Okay, right? Well, the Bible says that God gave us a free will, so you're doing it out of your own free will. You can just stop using. You can just say no to the drug whenever, because God gave you the free will. Let's work through this. Let's process this a little bit. Okay, did God give you a free will? Absolutely. Okay. If God gave you a free will to freely choose to serve him or to disobey him, right? Do you maybe think that there's an enemy out there who would want to do anything possible to either limit or eliminate your ability to exercise your free will? Is there a God out there? Yes. Did he give me a free will? Yes. Is there an enemy? Do you think that enemy would do anything possible to try to limit my ability to exercise my free will? Now, I don't believe, right? I don't believe that we ever fully lose our ability to choose freely. We never lose our free will, right? I don't believe that. But I do believe, and this is you can see this in scientific studies. There's actually a book called my goodness, I'm drawing a blank here. I'll get you the book, The Biology of Desire. Okay, the book is called The Biology of Desire, and a neurobiologist really kind of brings this up in the book that brain science says that the neurons that fire together wire together, right? And so basically what that means is that your brain has got all these different neurons, and they are sending messages, electrochemical messages through these neurons in your brain. By the way, we're going to talk about these different, electrochemical brain chemistry stuff in one of these episodes here. But basically, when neurons fire together over and over, I mean, when the message is passed through from one neuron to the other, those neurons, the more that pathway gets used in your brain, the closer they get together. And the closer they get together, the more it's like automatic that's the path that's going to be taken. Okay. And so the neurons that fire together, wire together. In addiction, you're talking about a very powerful firing of your neurons, right? A very powerful sending messages through your brain. And so that is going to bring those neurons closer and closer together to the point where that almost becomes the automatic. Okay. Whatever you did that caused that pathway to fire up, right? In your brain, that pathway to fire up in your brain, that almost becomes an automatic. And it's almost as if because it's so automatic that becomes the default behavior, the default activity. Okay. And so when that becomes the default activity, it's almost as if the window of choice very, very, very much narrows. Okay. I don't believe we ever fully lose our ability to choose freely. But when it comes to this activity, this behavior of drug use, right? This behavior of addictive, compulsive drug use, that window of choice narrows and narrows and narrows and narrows to the point where it's almost as if the choice is made for you, and and the ability for us, that window of opportunity for us to choose is so narrow that we miss that window. Okay, we miss that window of opportunity. If I can say it this way, there is we're going to get some scientific language here, but a stimulus produces, a stimulus produces a reaction in us, and that reaction, produces a behavior from us, right? And so that stimulus, right, between the stimulus and the action, or the stimulus and the behavior, there's a window of opportunity. We can choose which behavior we are going to do based on the stimulus, right? Based on what prompted the behavior, what stimulated us to behave, right? And so we have a choice. There's a window of opportunity there. But when it comes to addictive drug use, this compulsive drug use, right? The decision to use or not to use, the window of opportunity to decide gets so narrow that the moment something, triggers us, the moment something stimulates us into drug use, the decision is made, and we miss that window of opportunity because it is so narrow. All right. That window of opportunity is not shut completely, but it is so narrow. All right. And so our milliseconds that we have of free will to be able to say yes or no, to be able to say left or right, to be able to say up or down, to be able to say forward or backwards, right? To be able to say use or don't use, right? Use the drug or don't use the drug. That becomes so narrow that the decision is almost made for us. Okay. So do we have a free will? Absolutely. God-given free will, right? Is there an enemy out there that wants to diminish our ability to choose freely? And the answer is yes, right? We never completely lose that ability of to exercise our free will, but that window becomes so narrow that we almost miss that window of opportunity. And so 3 types of drug use, right? We have recreational drug use, medical drug use, and addictive drug use. Now, I want to give an opinion here, okay? And this is, I'm being very clear here that this is my opinion, okay? We oftentimes look down on addictive drug use, but justify recreational drug use. And I'll tell you what I mean. Okay. I was having a conversation one time with a minister, okay, with a minister who was, pretty in favor of having a beer, a draft beer with his burger on a Friday night when he went out with his friends. And that was kind of a thing that he did, right? Him and some friends, him and some buddies would go out with his wife and with their wives or whatever. They would go out and they would order a burger, order some sort of food, and have a draft beer, right, with their meal. And so the question was this, right? Should you be drinking if you're a pastor, right? And the response was this, right? In this conversation, the response was this: well, I'm not getting drunk. I'm just having one beer. Okay, we can justify it that way. Okay, let's go with that, right? I'm not getting drunk. I'm just having one beer. The Bible says that drunkenness is a sin. It doesn't say that drinking beer is a sin, right? If I'm not getting drunk, I'm not sinning. Okay, let's go with that, right? Let's go with that train of thought. And again, I'm giving an opinion here. Okay, you're not drunk. You're just drinking one beer. If you were to drink one beer and you were to get in your car and you were to drive away from that restaurant, right? You don't feel drunk. but you make one little swerve, one little mistake, right? And you get pulled over by the policeman, or maybe you've got a tail light out and you didn't even know it, right? You get pulled over by the policeman, and the policeman smells a little something on your breath, pulls you out, and he gives you a breathalyzer test. That one beer that you drank that you probably don't even feel puts you over the legal limit, at least where I'm from, right? Puts you over the legal limit for drunkenness, because even just that one beer has already impaired your ability to drive. Okay. Hasn't diminished your ability, hasn't eliminated your ability to drive, but according to the law, right, and according to medical science, it has already impacted your ability to drive a vehicle. Okay, which makes you more of a danger to those other people on the road, whether you feel like you are drunk, intoxicated, or not, right? So God says drunkenness is a sin. He doesn't say drinking a beer is a sin. But the policeman says that the one beer that you drank, even though you didn't even feel it, has already impaired your ability to drive a motor vehicle. That's called drunkenness. Okay, that's how drunk do you have to be in order to be drunk, right? How intoxicated do you have to be in order to be considered intoxicated? The Bible says that drunkenness is a sin. Okay, Jesus, this pastor, one beer has already, impaired your ability to drive. Okay. We'll set that one aside for now. Let's take a look at the second argument, because he said this: I can stop whenever I want. I'm not addicted. Okay. I'm not an alcoholic. Okay. Let's break down that argument. Okay. Again, I'm giving an opinion here. Okay. You're not an alcoholic. You can stop whenever you want. How do you know you can stop whenever you want? Okay. As somebody who has worked in the field, how do you know that unless you actually do, right? You don't have to prove it to me, right? But as far as I know, you are not being honest and truthful with me unless I can see that you actually stop. Okay, so either you're lying to me and you are addicted, right? And you can't admit it, or you can't see it yourself, right? Or you can stop right now, right? And not drink again. And so, but the question is this, right? The question is this. On the one hand, you have addictive drug use, where compulsion is the driving factor. On the other hand, you have recreational drug use, which you claim you are doing, right? Where choice is the factor, right? Compulsiveness, loss of, diminished ability to choose, or recreational use, full ability to choose. Which one is worse, right? Which one is worse? On the one hand, you have no, like your choice is diminished, right? Your choice is severely impaired. Your choice is severely limited. Your ability to choose is gone. On the other hand, you are 100% choosing this. You say that you have 100% ability to stop using, but you continue to use, right? You continue to drink. I'm not saying you have an addiction problem. I'm saying maybe you do, maybe you don't. We never know unless you completely stop right now, right? But what you're telling me is that you are, out of your own volition, out of your own choice, choosing this. Whereas an addicted person, who you seem to be putting yourself above, has a limited ability to choose, a very diminished ability to choose. And then here was the third argument in this discussion, right? The third argument in this discussion is, well, if it was offending somebody, I would stop. Point taken, right? I made this statement at a youth camp one time, and I was doing a training for the workers at this youth camp. I was providing a little bit of education for them on the topics, right? And I made this statement, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, you're just a Bible banger, right? You're just somebody who just, you're somebody who just preaches the Bible and that's it, right? No, right? From the perspective of life experience, from the perspective of the alcohol and drug counselor, from the perspective of the minister, okay? Life experience, me, myself, and those around me. From the perspective of the addiction counselor, right? Which is, I've worked with a lot of people who are struggling with addiction to chemical use, to substance use. And from the perspective of the minister, the Bible, right? There is no room in a minister's life for drug use, including alcohol use, right? We're gonna put that in there, right? And so anyway, I didn't mean to go, that far with it, but I just wanted to pull out some points here. I wanted to pull out some things here because we need to be able to distinguish between those three. Is it recreational drug use? Is it medical drug use? Is it addictive drug use, right? We need to be able to distinguish between those three so that we can more accurately help people who are struggling in the addictive drug use. And so, and even help people who are in the recreational drug use and medical drug use to not fall into that third category of compulsive addictive drug use. And so I hope that was helpful to you. We will pause this video here and we will see you guys in the next video.